Superintendent, PPRB, and Mr. Kong Wing-Cheng, Senior Superintendent, PPRB, Mr. Wang Waishen, Senior Superintendent, Operations, Mr. Li Kuai-Hua, Senior Superintendent, OCTB, and to Mr. Kwok's left, we have Mr. Lok Chen, Senior Superintendent, Operations, Hong Kong Island, and also Mr. Li Man Yu, Superintendent, Enforcement and Control Division, Traffic, Hong Kong Island. Mr. Kwok. Good afternoon. In relation to a public procession to be held the coming Sunday on Hong Kong Island, the 8th of December, the police has issued a notice of no objection. Mr. Lok Chen, Senior Superintendent Operations of Hong Kong Island, and also Mr. Li Man Yu, Superintendent Traffic Hong Kong Island, will brief you on the police arrangements and also the police's position. In relation to the suggestion of a general strike to be held on 9th of December, Monday, I will also state the police's position and make an appeal to the public. Finally, we'll also brief the media on the discovery of dangerous chemicals at Xingmun Reservoir yesterday, that is the 5th of December. Over to you, Mr. Ng. Now, I'd like to explain about the public order event to be held on Sunday, the 8th of December. I'd like to explain and also make an appeal. There are two parts to this public order event in the afternoon of the 8th of December. First, there will be a public meeting in the central lawn of Victoria Park, and then a march will set off from Victoria Park, and the public procession will end at the pedestrian precinct at Chater Road Central. In relation to the POE, the police issued the notice of no objection to the organizer. As per previous public order events held in Victoria Park, the police would introduce crowd management measures near Causeway Bay, Tien Hau, and Victoria Park. We would like to appeal to participants to try to use public transport to access Victoria Park. And once you arrive, you should follow the directions given by police officers at scene and also volunteers of the organizing party to ensure that the procession can take place in a peaceful, orderly, and safe manner. As for the routes of the public procession, it is by and large the same as previous ones. Basically, on the westbound of all traffic lanes of the procession route and also the train lines, they will be opened for the public taking part in the procession. Whereas for eastbound traffic lanes, they will be reserved for emergency vehicular access and also for use by eastbound traffic. Apart from the above arrangements, the police would also like to emphasize the following points. We'd like to appeal to the public the following. As we've always said on every occasion, the police have great respect for the rights of citizens to take part in meetings and processions and to air their views. Our established policy has been to facilitate the smooth conduct of peaceful public order events. At the same time, we also need to ensure public order and safety and safeguard the rights and freedoms of other individuals. To ensure the smooth conduct of the public procession this Sunday in a safe and orderly manner, we'd also like to share with you a few points on the notice of no objection. First of all, we have been in close contact with the organizer. We have had a meeting to go through the details of this public order event. We also request that the organizer provides 200 volunteers to help, or marshals to help with the to help manage this activity to make sure that participants can take part in the event in a safe and orderly manner. And in the event of any emergency or violent incident happening, under some circumstances, we may need to suspend or even terminate a public meeting or public procession. We ask for the public's understanding, and we hope the organizer would also work with the police to ensure that the whole public meeting and public procession could be held in a peaceful and safe manner. Last point the public procession should end at 10 p.m. at the pedestrian precinct in Chater Road Central. I would appeal to participants to leave the venue peacefully at the end of the march instead of gathering at the destination. I reckon that there will be quite a lot of participants in this event, and if the participants gather, it will affect the rest of the procession. And as you have seen in the past few months, majority of public order events were hijacked by a few criminal elements, such that such peaceful events could turn into violent clashes or even a riot. These criminal elements are irresponsible, and they severely hamper the rule of law in Hong Kong. They also deprive other members of the public in taking part in peaceful and lawful assembly and procession and the freedom of speech. So I'd like to appeal to radical protesters to stop using violence, and we'd like to appeal to all members of the public to say no to violence, and they should not continue to condone or tolerate or romanticize violence. We must not turn a blind eye to violence, and the government and the police has zero tolerance to violence, and we will take swift enforcement action to protect the lives of members of the public and property. Finally, I'd like to appeal to members of the public taking part in this public order event to follow the instructions given by the police and the marshals of the organizer to ensure that the whole event could take place in a peaceful and orderly manner. And perhaps now I'll give the floor to Mr. Lee, Superintendent of Traffic Hong Kong Island, to brief you on the road closure arrangements. Thank you. I'm going to go through the special traffic arrangements on the date of the public procession. At the starting point of the procession, there will be traffic diversions and road closure in phases. We can start with 10:30 in the morning. If you take a look at the map, for the blue part, that is the Pin Hau PTI, public transport interchange of Park Tower, and the public car park at Heng Fat Street, they will be closed first, except parking spaces for the disabled. And then in the afternoon at 1:30, depending on the crowd situation, if necessary, the roads in the vicinity of Causeway Bay and Tin Hau will be closed. First of all, you can look at the left-hand side, the red parts in Causeway Bay. These roads will be closed. Sugar Street, Great George Street, Patterson Street, Kingston Street, Cleveland Street, Gloucester Road, both bounds, and the Tai Hang Road flyover, both bounds off Victoria Park. As for the top right corner in the red part in Tin Hau, these roads will be closed. Heng Fat Street, Electric Road, Lau Lee Street, and Lau Sin Street. And then at 1:45 p.m., the police will further expand the scope of road closure in Causeway Bay. The slip roads to the main route will be closed, including Jardine Street, Lee Garden Road, Tanglong Street, Canal Road East, Canal Road West, and Borrington Road. And that is the purplish parts in the map. And then at 2 p.m., slightly an hour before the public procession begins, the major procession route will be closed, including westbound of Causeway Road, that's the starting point outside Victoria Road, and Ewell Street, westbound of Hennessy Road, Moulton Terrace, Irvine Street, Pennington Street, part of the southbound of Percival Street and Tin Lock Lane. Next slide. From Tin Lock Lane to Admiralty, the section of Hennessy Road. And then at 3:30 p.m., roads in Admiralty will be closed, including Queensway westbound, a section of Davie Road Central and Icehouse Street, and that is the roads marked in light blue. During the procession, if necessary, the police may stop participants for the time being to allow traffic to go through in order to help other road users. And these Areas include the eastbound Causeway Road outside gate number 15 of Victoria Park, Hennessy Road and Fleming Road Junction, and also Garden Road and Queens Road Central. That is the black circles in the chart, in the diagram. The tram lines will also be closed starting from 2 p.m. Tram service departing from Western District would only be provided between Kennedy Town to West Point City. Whereas for eastbound tram service, the only Chao Kei Wan to Tong Shui Road in North Point could be maintained. As for the tram service in Happy Valley, it will be suspended until the end of the procession. The police estimates that due to the road closure and diversion measures, the traffic in the area will be very congested. We therefore advise drivers not to drive into the affected areas on that day. Alternative routes could be used, and drivers could pay attention to the broadcasts on radio and notices issued by the Transport Department. Bus services will also be affected. Passengers should pay attention to notices put up in bus compartments and at stations, and the relevant information have also been uploaded to the Transport Department's website, and please check the website for details. And so much for traffic arrangements. I'll give the floor to Mr. Kwok.
I believe that all the Hong Kong citizens wouldn't like to see the rioters who take advantage of the event to unleash violence and once again turn this peaceful violence into a law-breaking mayhem. As for this public event this Sunday, the police once again appeal to the organizers to closely work with us to ensure the entire procession can be conducted in an orderly and peaceful manner. Just in case for a recurrence of what happened in the last few months, some of the violent protesters and the rioters have hijacked the protests that give rise to any violence. We hope that the organizers, besides working with the police, and also drum up the courage to condemn the violence. It's easy to vandalize. However, what happened in the aftermath, we notice that how to rebuild and repair is a long-term and challenging lesson. Every day we see on the streets, it's still everywhere that the on trail marks of destruction and arson committed after the protests. Lots of traffic lights have been broken, and road users have lost their traffic signal, which led to traffic chaos and seriously endangering road safety. In these periods, when the motorists pass through the intersection without a traffic signal, they need to be extra careful. And pedestrians will need to weave through the traffic in order to cross the road, which gives rise to plenty of dangerous situations. For the elderly, the mobility impaired, and for the blind, this is a catastrophe. And this past Wednesday, 4th of December, in Tin Shui Wai, there was a fatal traffic accident. A wheelchair-bound man, while crossing an intersection with the traffic lights destroyed, while he was crossing the road, he was hit by a truck, and he was suffered from fatal injuries. This tragedy is one too many. We hope the public should take it seriously, and mistaken that these are lifeless objects, and forgot that these traffic signals are extremely important in maintaining traffic order and prevention of traffic accidents. In fact, these traffic lights are the soul on the road. Without these traffic lights, they are very dangerous to the pedestrians, the motorists, and the passengers inside. Since June, across the territory, there are over 700 sets of traffic lights been suffering varying degrees of damage. And to the extent that we need to reconnect the wiring underground. As of this morning, there's still over 50 sets of traffic lights that yet to be repaired. Each round of destruction is deprived the rights of other road users. Besides traffic lights, the major arteries are a favorite target of the rioters. And last Friday in the early hours, 28th of November, the rioters had put multiple pieces of boulder and long steel rods, throwing them from a flyover onto the Chinmun Highway, destroying multiple cars and seriously endangered the safety of motorists. For these atrocities committed by rioters, we cannot condone them. We have prepared you a footage. In fact, we're not only worried about the public event on Sunday being hijacked. The police also took note that on Monday, the 9th of December, someone have called for a general strike. And the police is quite concerned. They're worried whether the radical protesters at the rioters will seize the occasion to paralyze traffic and to assault innocent civilians. As you can see from the clip, on November the 11th, at the day of the so-called general strike, there were violent incidents across the territory. In Manshan, a man was suspected to engage in a quarrel with the rioters, thus was doused with flammable liquid, then set alight. As of now, the injured is still in a serious condition and remain hospitalized. And November 13th, a 70-year-old man in Shangshui was hit dead by a brick in a violent confrontation. This incident was very heartbreaking. Like with all Hong Kong citizens, the police wouldn't want anyone getting hurt. We appeal to the protesters must remain calm and stop resorting to violence, and stop turning this so-called general strike into a days of random destruction and assault. Another worrying situation that it seems that someone is collecting large amount of dangerous chemicals, and these chemicals are capable of manufacturing the kind of weapons that have been used in past protests by the rioters. And yesterday, at the Shingmen Reservoir, the police have seized 59 cans of highly corrosive and exceeded chemicals, in total of 137 kilograms. If anyone had used them appropriately, they could cause huge casualty to the public. The police is very concerned about this and is tracing the source of these chemicals, and also investigate whether this is related to the theft of the chemicals from the university labs.
Regrettably, after a report had been made by universities earlier, they have not been able to provide comprehensive information about the total number of bottles of chemicals stolen. This poses certain difficulties to our investigation. We'd like to take this opportunity to urge the relevant institutions to provide information to us as quickly as possible to expedite our investigation. The management should also pay close attention as to the safekeeping of chemicals within the campus and to enhance security, to stop criminal elements from stealing dangerous chemicals from universities to harm the public. I'll give the floor to Mr. Kong to brief you on the police's situation regarding the operations. Thank you. First, regarding police officers getting injured during operations, from Monday to today, that is between 2nd to 6th of December, no police officer suffered injury in operations. In the operations past few days, the police did not use any ammunition. This proves that if the rioters do not show up and if there is no violent incidents, there is no need for the police to use any ammunition. Arrest figures. From Monday to today, in police operations, altogether 22 persons were arrested, including 18 male and 4 females between the age of 15 and 84. They are involved in the various offences such as criminal damage, riot, common assault, assaulting a police officer, disorderly conduct in a public place, theft, and obstructing a police officer. I'd like to turn to a case that happened in Shamshui-Po yesterday. It is a case of criminal damage. It happened at about 4 p.m. yesterday. 2 uniform branch colleagues received a 999 call and proceeded to the junction of Taipei Road and Namchang Street to handle a case of criminal damage. On arrival, they saw a male using a metal pipe and damaging a traffic signal box at the junction. Our colleagues went forward to stop him and warned him in vain. This male even charged towards our colleagues with the metal pipe in hand. Our police officers therefore put this male under control with the police baton and pepper spray. This 27-year-old male was arrested for criminal damage in the end. The arrested male claimed he is unwell and is now receiving treatment in Caritas Medical Center. Criminal Investigation Team 2 of Shamshui-Po is now following up on the matter. Vandalizing a traffic signal box would cause malfunctioning of the traffic lights, and it is very selfish. It affects drivers, passengers, as well as pedestrians. On conviction, offenders of criminal damage would attract an imprisonment of 10 years. And as mentioned by Mr. Kwok, vandalizing traffic lights do have a very severe impact on Hong Kong people. I'll give the floor back to Mr. Kwok. In conclusion, apart from sporadic violent incidents in the past 2 weeks, the social atmosphere on the whole has been quite peaceful. And regarding the public procession coming Sunday, the police shares the sentiment of the general public. We do hope the organizer could work with the police to ensure that this public procession could be held and completed in a lawful, safe, and orderly manner. All along, we pride ourselves on the rule of law. Any act that is against the law, any violent, vandalizing act should not win any applause. In the past 6 months, on the one hand, rioters have engaged in massive vandalism. On the other hand, we have also worked hard to restore order. In the whole process, it is a lose-lose situation. No one wins. And meanwhile, we've lost our channel of communication, trust, respect for each other. We've also lost a peace and quiet place to call home. Whether or not you want to take part in the public procession, we appeal to everyone to work hard with us so as to restore calm society and normal order in society.
The police have received the application for holding a public order event to be held this weekend, and I will briefly talk about the arrangement. We have issued a letter of no objection to a public order event to be held on Hong Kong Island this Sunday. The public meeting will be held in Victoria Park, followed by a public procession, which will be end at the Trader Road Central. I would like to appeal to all participants to take public transport to arrive at the venue of public meeting. As the events take place during weekend, the area is expected to be very busy. There will be crowd management along the route. The police advise all participants to disperse peacefully after arriving at the finishing point at Trader Road using the central MTR station. I must stress the police respect citizens' right to assembly and freedom of speech. We will facilitate peaceful and orderly participation in all public order events. When deciding whether to issue a letter of no objection, we will conduct an independent safety risk assessment, considering a range of operational factors. Every application is considered on a case-by-case basis. On this occasion, I appeal to the organizer and those who will take part in the public event to adopt peaceful and rational means of expression. Don't let the rioters again hijack the peaceful protest and take away the right and freedom of the citizens. More, we noticed that protesters are calling for a general strike next Monday throughout Hong Kong. I must emphasize, not only will this bring great inconvenience to everyday life of the Hong Kong people, this will also pose a grave threat to public safety when rioters build barricades and vandalize traffic lights in order to paralyze the traffic. Please don't let irrationality take over our daily life. Moving on, we noticed there are public concerns over the seizures of chemicals at Shing Mun Country Park. The police received a report that rioters had stolen a large number of chemicals from university laboratories and stored them in the vicinity of Shing Mun Reservoir. Upon investigation, we seized a total of 59 bottles of chemicals near the barbecue area of the Shing Mun Reservoir. Among these chemicals, some are highly corrosive or inflammable. Coming into contact with them will cause serious bodily harm. Members of the public should make a report if they come across suspicious chemicals and not to come into contact with them. Previously, police have received reports from universities about theft of chemicals from their laboratories. Unfortunately, we have yet to receive a full list of missing chemicals, which make our investigation rather difficult. On this occasion, we appeal to the universities concerned to provide the relevant information to us as soon as possible and remind them of the proper storage of such chemicals and dangerous goods, because reckless disposal of this chemical is an extremely irresponsible and dangerous act. Moving on to the arrest figures. Since Monday, the police have arrested in total 22 people, consisting of 18 male and 4 females, aged between 15 and 84. Offences include taking part in a riot, assaulting police officer, and criminal damage. In conclusion, while we always respect people's right of assembly and freedom of speech, we are alarmed by the epidemic that radical protesters resort to violence in expressing their opinion. As much as we are responsible for keeping a close watch, there are many other stakeholders, especially the event organizer. They should be responsible for the safety of the participants in public order events. I would like to appeal for your help and support. We need every citizen to play a part in helping us restore law and order. Please refrain from any obstruction when our officers are carrying out their lawful duties. Please cut ties with rioters and criminals and help us to bring Hong Kong back on the right track. Thank you.
嚟緊到我哋嘅。
Well, we will start the Q&A session. TV.
TV News. I'd like to ask the question on the latest situation. At around 3-something, and in Lei Moon, there's on a minibus, and there was chemicals were found, and also the theft in university. There's a lot of cases of this suspected explosive. How would you pursue them? The second question, and on the operational call sign, and as heard from Mr. Wang, the implementation is not satisfactory. We see a lot of the riot officers have been putting a lot of badges that had unrelated to their identification, and some of the officers have putting the warning to use tear gas in the prominent places, which would cause confusion. For this coming weekend, would you implementing the operational call sign in full? And finally, as of November, we see dozens of cases of police shooting, which 9 of them are related to the anti-amendment saga. And we're all concerned about the shooting in Sai Wan Hall in Chunwan. Have the police management provided psychological counseling for the officers who fired to see if their psychological state to sustain a professional judgment at the front line? And for the officers involved, are they still working at the front line? For your serious question, for your first question, well, as we call the press office, we haven't received the information about your case. I'll make an appeal here for anyone. If they come across any suspicious articles, for example, chemicals or explosives and other suspicious objects, first to call the police after ensuring their own safety. We will dispatch staff to handle them. And for the details, the PPRB will supplement. As for operational call sign, I'll hand over to Mr. Wang to answer. As for your second question, I believe the similar question raised on Monday, that there are other identifications or badges on the officer's uniform. On that day, I could provide a more humane answer. And some of the badges are for building up team spirit. And for also from building up team morale. And for operational call sign, we've been rolled out in the past 2 weeks. So it takes some time for our colleagues to adjust to any new measures and for the effective rollout. And 2 purposes for the operational call sign. First, for efficiency, we can see it sustained, and also we had an obligation so supply identification in the complaint handling mechanism in order to identify our colleagues. Well, that's actually one of the many methods for identification. On the use of operational call sign, we'll ask our frontline officers to display them prominently. As we all know, for the anti-riot police, they have a lot of protective gear with them. So while rolling out, we have been reminding our officers in choosing the most prominent spot and unobstructed spot to display their call sign to achieve the dual objectives. In the past 2 weeks, we've been talking to the front lines and start rolling out the call signs. And while rolling out, the front line will also provide feedback first, for example, whether enough space and whether they will drop the call sign or some image just obstruct from view while doing other things. We explain to the front line that this is an obligation under the complaint handling mechanism. Thus, our front line do understand and very happy to use it. while rolling out, will be reminding our frontline and also the supervisors. Well, if unintentionally they have dropped the card or misplaced it somewhere or obscured by other gears, we'll remind them to switch to another spot. I believe it will take some time to let them adapt to it. As for whether they will use it this Sunday, the majority taking part of the anti-riot exercise will start distributing the call signs, and some of the colleagues have yet to collect them. They will continue to have other identification on the uniform. However, this operation call sign has been rolling out. As for your question on the use of firearms, the police attach great importance and also conduct investigation of the use of firearms to find out the circumstances and the reasons. As for the psychological counseling, for any officers who fired, they have under huge stress. So whenever this firing occurred, we'll arrange our clinical psychologists to meet them. That's compulsory. And after the meeting, there will be follow-up counseling to find out the emotions and in making the appropriate support. And as for the progress of the video incidents, I'm not able to provide the details. I can supplement the information later where necessary. Next, RTHK. So I want to ask you about the operational call sign. Just now, you said it takes time to let the front line adjust to it. You're just putting a card around the chest area. Does it really take weeks to adjusting? That means you would allow for tomorrow the officers to put other kind of cards in that on the chest, and for the Sunday for the procession by the Civil Human Rights Front. Because early November there are 3 rally in Hong Kong Island have given the letter of no objection, and yet they were terminated and even dispersed by the police. Can you promise that it would not happen on Sunday, and how would you handle them? And next question, and today we have the latest opinion poll on the satisfaction rate as the lowest of all disciplinary services, and 40% of them have given a score 0. Is it related to the enforcement action by the police? Does it represent that the police have lost all trust in the Hong Kong public? And I think Mr. Wang just explained on the operational call sign. Anything to add? Just one thing. Thank you for your question. What you said is not fair. When you had never served as a policeman, how would you know of the difficulty of putting on extra gear? However, I can promise you that for everything we do and everything we introduce, we are committed wholeheartedly. The operational call sign, besides improving efficiency, is also provide an identification for the complaint handling mechanism. It is not required by the law. However, we want to support this. I want to refine arrangements as we roll it out. As for this, as simple as inserting a piece of paper into your chest area, is there any room for that? And whether it will drop, and whether you will have other gear in front of you, I can't say for sure because you won't understand. It's really hard to understand so quickly. I hope you can have trust in the Hong Kong police, and please don't be misled by others that we're not intending to do it well. That's not something we want to see. And now I'll hand over to Mr. Ng on the protests and the procession by Civil Human Rights Front. For your question, and for every public event and the procession will conduct independent assessment. We also have a policy to try to facilitate a peaceful and a lawful protest and procession. In some situations with a risk assessment, we see that there are risk flags whether we can conduct some deployment to make it happen. So that's the perspective we will take in trying to balance the interests of both sides, whereas to allow as much peaceful and orderly protest as much as possible.
As for the early termination of processions in early November, that was done in light of violent incidents. As for the coming Sunday, as I mentioned before, we'd like to step up measures with the organizer with enhanced deployment of police manpower to ensure that the procession this Sunday could be held in a peaceful, rational, and orderly manner. We'd also like to appeal to the organizer, since they have 200 marshals. We appeal to them to work closely with us, and it is also the responsibility of the organizer. Apart from following the instructions of the police, the participants should refrain from engaging in unlawful acts, and that they must keep watch of their own safety if there are any criminal acts involved. I just want to emphasize that if there is no violent incident, no riot at all, the police will not terminate any procession. As for the last question, I will give the floor to Mr. Kong. Since early June, it's been 6 months since incidents happened, and undoubtedly, in times of commotion, the police presence must be higher than that of other disciplined forces. Under different scenarios, we are required to handle different incidents. We need to stop law-breaking behavior. We need to stop people from blocking the road, blocking the traffic, hurling petrol bombs, vandalizing shops, and we cannot just stand by and watch. So compare when you talk about the opinion poll to gauge the police's performance, I don't think this is fair, because this is a difficult time for everyone in Hong Kong. Violence has been escalating. In early June, protesters hurled bricks, and then they hurled petrol bombs, and they attacked people holding different political views. And a 70-year-old man was hit to death by a brick. And as you could see in the clip shown just now, somebody got set on fire. It is the police's responsibility to handle these cases. It affects not only the police force. The reputation of the whole of Hong Kong has been tarnished. Different countries and places have issued travel alerts. Many major events have been cancelled. It is unfair to put the entire blame on the police. Let's not forget that if rioters have not come out to cause damage, our police officers would not have to work so hard. I don't agree that we have lost the public's confidence, as you put it. But all in all, I do feel that we can continue to make improvements. And that is why on the handling of incidents since early June, we have been taking different approaches and we have been making changes. Say for the Hong Kong Polytechnic University incident, we did adopt a rational, peaceful and flexible approach with a view to avoid as much force as possible for the matter to be resolved. Over the past 6 months, we have explored different approaches to make our work more acceptable by the public at large. But like we always say, can social order be restored mainly by the police? The answer is definitely no. We need the general public to come out and say no to violence. For rioters who have been hurling petrol bombs and attacking people holding different political views, they need to stop as well so that we can restore calm in society. Next question. CNBC.
The lady at the back. Oh, okay, all three. Sorry.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to ask about the Sunday's march. What are the criteria for the police to decide to call off the march or to end the march early? Can you just list them out? And for earlier marches, aside from complaints that police approved marches earlier, you're also criticized for the use of tear gas when there are vulnerable people like the elderly as well as kids who are still taking part in the march. So can you also list out the criteria? At what point will you use tear gas or other weapons to tackle the protesters during a peaceful march? And do you have any contingency plans for the vulnerable to leave the area when you face any sort of violence and you feel that there's a need to use tear gas? And the organizers also spoke about that the police may be willing to open up more lanes on Sunday if there are more participants than estimated. Can you talk about what are the plans? How many more lanes do you plan to open up? Do you have any, can you reveal the contingency plans, please? Thank you.
Since all the questions seems to be related to the Sunday protest, so I would first pass it to Mr. to handle it first, and I will see whether Wong sir would like to supplement on the use of force or tear gas.
Okay, thank you for your question. So you have a few questions within the whole question, actually. So the first one, you're talking about the criteria of calling off or ending the march, or what we call the procession. So based on our assessment, actually, we do a threat assessment before the event, and we do threat assessment during the event, okay? So during the previous events, the reason why we stopped it is because there was an obvious breach of the peace. And there's an obvious risk to public safety and public order. So at that point, we have to end the event. Sometimes on the TV, or sometimes just by one report by press, you can only see a certain angle that you might not be able to see the whole picture of what is actually happening. Just for example, on this Sunday, so you're asking about the criteria when we're going to stop. So any violence that will take place, any breach of the peace that will take place, which will put the general public at risk, we will stop the procession. Okay, so perhaps during your reporting at the scene, one scene might be very peaceful, while say in Causeway Bay it might be very peaceful, but at the same time, violence are actually happening in Central. So we cannot just stop the procession or the meeting at Central and continue to let the people in Causeway Bay to go towards the Central district. So at that moment, we will stop the whole procession from happening to ensure that everybody who participate in this procession are safe, and we can keep this, make sure that everybody can go home safe, basically. Okay, about contingency or the criteria of when using tear gas, I believe the answer is the same. We won't use tear gas unless there are violence. We won't use tear gas unless there's a breach of the peace. You said that there might be other elderly or children that are at scene. Okay, so we will try our best to give enough warnings. We'll try our best to communicate with the marshals at scene, to tell the people at scene that this procession or this meeting is no longer safe, and ask them to disperse immediately. Okay, we will try our best to do that. But sometimes when violence just come at our way all of a sudden, it's very, very difficult for our officers to not use force and try to contain the situation. And if they don't use force to contain the situation, it is very possible that the violence or the disorderly situation might even become worse. So you have to understand that as well. So for the last question about opening up of lanes, I think you can see during a previous processions or meetings in the past 6 months, we will have discretion. The most senior commander on the ground, he will decide how many lanes to open up to ensure that the procession can be conducted in a safe and a smooth manner. So there's a discretion there for the commander at scene to decide whether or not there's a need to open up more lanes for the procession to proceed. Okay, thank you. That's all.
下一條。
Next question. Now, news. Some question that does that mean the police can no guarantee that before the end of the march, while the crowds were dispersing, that it will not use any tear gas or crowd control equipment, for example, tear gas or rubber bullets. And so last time in the TST procession, someone was throwing bombs, and before press you can claim anyone used it except said were hurling bricks or hurling glass bottles. On that day, some protesters did indeed use smoke bombs. I'll pass on to Mr. Ng to talk about the first, and then we'll answer the second part of the question. So whether we can undertake not to use any tear gas or rubber rounds, I definitely can promise you that on the peaceful and orderly procession, if no one disturbing the social peace, no one using violence, no one hurling bricks or petrol bombs, I can tell you that we definitely will not use tear gas and definitely will not use rubber bullets. Thank you. As for the Tsim Sha Tsui procession, whatever happened, and we had given account in the last week press conferences. So why did PPRB must disseminate this information through the social media and other channels to hope that the participants and the other civilians can gather real-time information of what at the scene, so that, for like what the reporter said, the elderly or the children, they will make their own judgment about the risk in making the suitable arrangements. And on that day, on the situation in Salisbury Road, so for at 4 and 5 p.m., that we have issued 2 social media posts. The first one was about on Salisbury Road, near the Modi Road Garden. There was throwing hard objects and bricks. Thus, we've issued the first appeal to alert the public nearby and also remind that we might use the necessary minimum force. And subsequently, some other colleagues have saw themselves that near the Empire Center that smoke bombs were used. In order to avoid public panic, and on our second post, we reminded these civilians and those who took part at the procession to be extra careful, because it may pose risk to public safety. Let us reiterate why we issue these social media posts, because we want to timely inform the public so that they can make suitable arrangements. Last 2 questions. Ming Pao. I'd like to follow up on operational call sign, because just now Mr. Wang said that a lot of us weren't police officers. From the public understanding, according to the police force ordinance, that the police need to show their warrant cards and their ID while on duty, and you didn't show your ID card and use it in operational call sign, and this is a lot of improvement with lots of officers not wearing it. That the police condoning officers not to observe the PFO and also the statutory requirements. And on Sunday, at 6 o'clock in Sam Shui Po, there was an off-duty officer on a motorcycle and have a quarrel with a pedestrian, and he had used police baton to assault this pedestrian. So is this off-duty officer being investigated, and any disciplinary action taken? And third question, and on the opinion poll, so the police ranking and the score is the lowest of all disciplinary services, and the satisfaction value is at negative 38%, the lowest since the unification. So besides accommodating team spirit and the morale, would the police attempt to salvage public confidence? On operational call sign, I'll pass on to Mr. Wang for any supplement. And for the off-duty police officer, Mr. Kong will take the question. And for last question on the opinion poll, I'll have something to add as well. On operational call sign, you did raise a good question. So in the absence of operational call sign, you need to show your warrant ID and the ID number for operation efficiency. And that they see we're wearing so much protective gear on the front line that may obscure the warrant card. The warrant operation call sign is to maintain operational efficiency and so as to continue to fulfill our duty under complaint mechanism for identification. So there's a purpose for rolling out this call signs. As for those that we don't, warrant police officers who don't understand the challenges facing policemen, that's the fact. Well, if you can to insert something on your chest, whether it's possible, and would it affect our gear and their safety, we take into consideration, and it would take time to changes our gear. As to insert a card on an ordinary uniform is much easier. However, if it's beneath under protection gear and the anti-rot gear, we need to something extra. We need to look for a space and make sure it is feasible. It's not that we just sew something random to stand in its place. However, we must something practical to let people to identify us. So it will take time. Not that we're not doing it; it's been rolling out gradually. Under the law, we are required to produce the ID card. If you are suspicious, our colleague would definitely produce their warrant cards. As for the unreasonable request, for example, while checking your ID, they ask for the officer's warrant ID instead. Well, they're not doubting the officer's identity. At that time, they're more challenging the powers rather than anything. So we need to entertain such unreasonable requests. This call for food for thought. For this kind of confrontation and challenging the statutory power and challenging the rule of law, I believe that this is not condoned in Hong Kong and will not be accepted. That's my supplement. Next, I will talk about the off-duty officer had used a police baton. At around 6:45 in the evening, there's an off-duty colleague, as you can see from the online footage, that was driving his motorcycle and passing by the Kwai Lam Street and Tai Nam Street in Sam Shui Po. So he was driving slowly, and all of a sudden there's a male crossing the road and stopped in the middle of the road and stopped in front of the motorcycle. And based on the scene observation that this man smell of alcohol, he could have been drinking, and rather on his gait is unstable. And the officer requests this man to leave since that he will obstruct the traffic. And this gentleman refused it and entered altercation with an officer. Following which, as we see from the clip, that this man then pushed this officer twice and sworn at our officer. So with this provocation and shoving, the officer got to the back of the motorcycle and obtained this extendable baton issued for alert, and it disclosed its identity as a policeman.
He also warned that male not to charge forward or use violence. Unfortunately, The warning fell through. This male continued to try to charge forward to our colleague, and the off-duty officer also confirmed that he had used the extendable baton to hit the male on the thigh once. This male then retreated. Other uniformed police officers of the district later on arrived on scene to handle the case. According to the information at hand, as both parties decided not to pursue further, this case would be dealt with as a dispute. I need to emphasize that in terms of our guidelines on the use of force, including the use of batons, be it the on-duty or off-duty officer, one must strictly abide by the guidelines. Referring to the incident we just mentioned, before the police officer used the baton, he already revealed his identity as a police officer, and in the face of the violent acts of this male, he had issued warnings. And as I explained, they were pushing and shoving, and to stop this male from further engaging in the act, the police officer then used the baton. As we read it, he indeed followed the guidelines on the use of force at the time. As for the opinion poll, I partially answered the question. As for improving relations with the public, Mr. Kwok can supplement. I need to emphasize once again that the police certainly accepts criticisms and strives for improvements if these are based on facts. We also pay attention to the opinion polls in the community, whether the comments are based on facts. In the past 6 months, however, there have been major clashes, especially it is a natural duty of a police officer to take action in the face of a law-breaking behavior. Violence has been escalating, and there have also been systematic smearing on the police force. There have also been fake news circulating on different platforms, including the media. So we must strive to clarify our position through the press conferences and through the social media and the internet, so that we can lay facts and level it with the public. Second, we also understand the public's views on the police force. We will be as transparent as possible. For example, if there are wrongful accusations of the police exercising excessive force, we would say invite individuals as third parties to witness our work at the Shanok Ling, so that they will understand the facts don't tally with the wrong accusations. And we will continue to forge collaboration with different stakeholders in the community. In the next term of the district councils, we will be visiting different councils to let the stakeholders understand our difficulties and to appeal to the public and the district councils to work with us to restore calm in society. Last question, cable. Cable TV, 3 questions. First, about the Civic Human Rights Front public procession. Can we know something about the police manpower arrangements and the degree of police presence? Second question, about chemicals. How much or what's the quantity of chemicals found in universities, and whether any report of loss has been made? Third question, about the Marine Police. Police launch sank. Has it to do with the environment, or is there something wrong with the Marine Police? First, about the Civic Human Rights Front procession, I would defer to Mr. and then Mr. Lee can give you some information about the chemicals found, and then I'll take the question on Marine Police. About the upcoming procession, I'm not in a position to disclose our internal manpower deployment at this press conference. I can only say that police presence will be maintained to keep law and order, and we also have a contingency plan should violence occur. we do have a plan for us to carry out the relevant duties. That's all from me. About chemicals stolen from universities, in Chinese university and polytechnic universities, certain quantities of chemicals have been stolen from their laboratories. We got hold of part of the information, but we also need to be understanding, because there are quite a number of laboratories in these universities. So far, we haven't been able to get a full list of the chemicals, the types of chemicals stolen. As for the quantity of chemicals retrieved, found in universities, we've passed the figures to universities for their own stock taking. We're confident that information will be provided to us eventually by the institutions, because for CAP 295, the Dangerous Goods Ordinance provides very clearly that regarding the storage, transport, and use of dangerous goods, these are subject to control, and I do believe that the universities do have a list of these dangerous chemicals. That's all from me. As for the police launch in Ma Lu Shui, Mr. Kong has information. Well, it's quite fortunate. This press conference is all about police operations, but right before I set off, I did receive a note from my colleague at 2:15 in the morning. The police force found a police launch sinking in Ma Lu Shui operational base. We contacted other departments such as the Fire Services Department for assistance. At 2:50 a.m., the whole police launch sank, and fortunately no injury was found and no ammunition or arms were stored on the police launch. The Marine headquarters would arrange for the shipwreck to be salvaged and an investigation into the cause of the incident. The police launch commenced its service in 1992, and we have a number of launches of the similar model in our fleet at the moment. Due to the incident happening in the small hours today, we have realized that these police launches may be aging. And for these aged police launches, they are mostly for backup or logistic uses. They are not often deployed in major operations. And this will help us deploy our fleet in a proper manner and will put safety first. That's the end of the press conference. Thank you.